All right, now went our YouTube streaming live. And we are waiting for a few more minutes for those who came, that people can have time to join the stream and be from the beginning. Right, great. Yay. I'm chatting. Okay. We are still, I think, waiting for one speaker who had some technical problems. So hang on there. We'll start in a couple of minutes. Let's see. I don't see everyone at the same time. Yeah, okay. So I should not leave the meeting, even it's being recorded, I think. So I think that even one speaker is a little bit having technical trouble. I think we're going to start now. It's 2 minutes after 6. And I would like to welcome all of you to the very first laser talk by Aalto University. We are, some of us are sitting in Finland and the rest is in different places of the world as it's online. I want to say something about the laser talks, why this was initiated. And this was, of course, initiated or thought out before the Corona time with the idea that in Aalto University, people from different disciplines and schools would have one event where they could meet each other. And that has been one of the initial sort of kicks to start doing something interesting, which would attract all kinds of people and you could share. Okay, so today, unfortunately, we are online. And potentially in the future also we will still be online, but we hope that maybe with the time we can be physically in some place, and then I assume it will be hybrid formats with the streaming and some people meeting each other. So a little bit Leonardo Laser Talks. It is a program of international gatherings that brings artists, scientists, humanities, technologists, philosophers together for informal presentations, sometimes performances, and conversations with the wider public. The mission of LASER is to encourage contribution to the cultural environment of a region by fostering interdisciplinary dialogue and opportunities for community building to over 40 cities worldwide. Well, now the interesting thing is that fostering the environment in the region and the local, however, our region and local has changed drastically with the Corona. So I think we welcome wherever you are as our region at the moment. LASER stands for Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. That's where it comes. Now I will hand it over to Ksenia Kaverina, who will shortly tell you as the audience how you can participate in this. Please take over, Ksenia.
Thank you, Laura, and good evening, everyone from my part as well. Yeah, here are some instructions for our participants on Zoom. The event is live streamed currently on YouTube. It's being recorded. You will be muted and your video will be off during the whole event. Please feel free to use the chat to communicate with us and with other attendees, and we will do our best to respond. If you want your question to be answered, live by some of the panelists, then please use the Q&A section that you see in the toolbar, and the moderator and panelists will be taking questions after presentations. In case something goes wrong with the connection, we will do our best to fix it as soon as possible, or if someone drops out of the meeting. We would like you to participate actively, but please remember that this is a safe space free from any kind of discrimination or harassment, and the chat as well as the comments will be moderated, and we hope you feel comfortable and enjoy this evening. I will now also post a link in the chat where you can register already now for the future updates about the laser community in Aalto, and we will be soon circulating the news about the next laser talk. Now I hand over to Laura again.
Okay, we have a first problem. I'm just saying it now aloud. Xenia, it seems that one of our speakers, Adam, is as an attendee and not as a panelist. And I couldn't find how to change. If you can, there he comes. Okay, that's great. So before introducing our main speakers or discussants, I want to also present the Aalto's laser team. And most of them are here in the Zoom window. So I'm Laura Beloff. I'm from the Department of Art in the School of Art, Design and Architecture. Then one who is still missing but might join us later, a little bit later, is Pia Fricker, who is from the Architecture Department and from the same School of Arts than I am. Then we have Koray Tahirolu, who is there. Koray can wave, yes. Department of Media and again School of Arts. Then we have Kirsi Peltonen, Department of Mathematics and Systems Analysis, School of Science. We have Nitin Shorny, Department of Computer Science from the School of Science. And we have Xenia Kaverina, who is also from the Art Department from the School of Arts, who has been the, I would say, with big thank you, really a main organizer of the event. Okay, let's start. So, adaptation. So we have chosen actually this theme for the whole year, and it will be investigated and explored through different aspects and relations within 3 to 4 talks we are organizing this year. And this is the very first one. I can already say now it will be later advertised. The second one will be on the 29th of April. And so adaptation, bodies in context. Even, I'm not going to say too much about it now, but even if I hope that we can today think about bodies also beyond the human, I would like to point out the recognition that as persons here today, we do represent a very narrow cultural and global context of white bodies and in a quite privileged position of being academics, scientists, and artists. So our perspective is definitely not universal, but colored and framed with our backgrounds and positions in the world. However, of course, I hope we can generate an interesting discussion, and therefore we would also very much welcome questions from audience that represent different perspectives, different positions, different cultures, different natures. And now to our speakers. So I'm going to read shortly through very short sort of our introductions. From first one will be then, and I will read now all the 3 sort of our speakers, then they will give us a short 10-minute presentations. So from Aalto University, we have Pauliina Ilmonen, who is an assistant professor in the School of Science and Department of Mathematics and Systems Analysis. In her research work, she focuses on topics in the field of mathematical statistics. Her most significant research topics include multivariate extreme value theory, invariant coordinate selection, blind source separation, functional data analysis, change point analysis, and analysis stationary processes. Also, pure mathematics is close to her heart. So there's a lot of terms which I think she will, to at least some of them, a little bit open up for us. Her interest lies on characteristics of meet and join hypermatrices. In addition to deriving theoretical results, she devotes some of her time to applied research related to epidemiology. The topics that interest her are cancer epidemiology and epidemiology of viruses. Doing applied work enables her to contribute to research that may have significant public health implications. Since 2018, Pauliina has served as the chair of the Finnish Statistical Society, and she's a member of FENSTAT's COVID-19 working group and a member of IAP COVID-19 expert group. And then I go through the next speaker. Representing arts, we have tonight Adam Zaretsky, who is a wet lab practitioner mixing ecology, biotechnology, non-human relations, body performance, and gastronomy. His art practice focuses on an array of legal, ethical, social, and libidinal implications of biotechnological materials and methods with focus on specifically on transgenic humans. Zaretsky stages lively, hands-on bioart production labs based on topics such as foreign species invasion, radical food science, jazz bioinformatics, tissue culture, transgenic design issues, iterative ethology and physiology, performance and stress, two last words. Then last but least, we have an expert on responsible robotics, Cristina Zaga, who is an assistant professor, speaker, and maker of poetic robots. She's a part of human-centered design group in the University of Twente. Her research bridges engineering, design, and philosophy to develop robots responsibly. She specifically investigates methodologies, methods, tools, and techniques to connect science and society through transdisciplinary responsible design of AI-driven technology, AI standing for artificial intelligence. She is particularly interested in developing co-design and speculative design methods to imagine, ideate, and design robots. Cristina believes in the power of poetic computation to bring about future-oriented reflection on the technology we want to develop. So that's the set of short talks which I would now invite on stage on this order. So Pauliina, take the stage and welcome.
Thank you. At first, I wish to thank the organizers. It is great to be here. Now I try to share my slides. I hope that you can see them. And I plan to talk to you about human senses and the messages that we send and receive. I'm a mathematician, so naturally my talk will be about math. Okay, about something else as well. And maybe related to, let's say, adaptation, at least a bit. So first part of my talk will be about blind source separation. And what on earth is blind source separation? Well, if we think about what happens in blind source separation, we assume that we observe a vector. Oh yes, that's a mathematical object, vector. And those vectors that we observe, these are linear mixtures of collection of some latent source variables. So summa summarum, we observe something that is a combination of something that is hidden. And these have plenty of applications in signal processing, economics, and biomedical applications. For example, if we want to measure the signals coming from our brain. And of course, since I'm a mathematician, let's look at it more formally. So this is basically the most simple blind source separation model that I could come up with. We have a vector x that is some omega times z. Omega is a matrix. That's the process that is trying to mix these signals so that we don't see them directly. And the hidden thing that we wish to see is the Z. Okay. And what do we want to do in blind source separation? Well, we want to, find these hidden sources. So we have to estimate this mixing process in the middle and try to unmix it. And there are plenty of algorithms for solving this. Some are made by me and my friends in science, because this is what we do. We derive formulae that can be applied to solve some real life phenomena. Okay, but note that if we actually manage to estimate this mixing process and find these hidden signals, this mixing process is not unique. In many blind source separation models, we can estimate several mixing processes and the corresponding unmixing systems that all lead to finding these hidden sources that we want to see. For example, the signals that are going on in our brain. Okay. But what if it happens that some of the signals that we observe are getting weak or missing? Well, what happens is that the importance of the remaining strong signals grows. Okay. Then to us humans, and as I am a mathematician, it means back to mathematics again. Okay, we humans, I think that we are a bit like a blind source separation system. I mean, we receive information, we hear, we see, we touch, we smell, and we taste. And we observe these 5 components, and we try to extract information based on that. We try to recover the hidden messages behind these 5 signals. And our algorithms are based on our own experiences. We have learned what it means when someone cries. We have learned what it means when someone is shouting at us. We all have our own algorithms. As in mathematical sense, in blind source separation, there are several algorithms. I have my algorithm, you have yours. And we are trying to recover these messages, but our experiences differ. And in blind source separation, if some of the signals are weak or missing, the task for trying to estimate this process, it becomes much more difficult. And the importance of the remaining strong signal, it grows. And this is exactly what happens to us humans as well. Now, during this pandemic, what happens? We cannot touch. We have to listen more carefully. We have to cover our face. Okay? Then, the signal is weaker, but we can look at the eyes of the other humans. But are we still able to recover the messages? Do we adapt well or don't we? What happens? Do we estimate these mixing functions now more carefully, or are we lost? Does laughter become more important when we cannot hug? I think so. But what happens when, after a long period of missing and weak signals, there comes a day when we can touch, we can see the whole picture, we don't have to cover our face unless we wish to. What happens then? We'll see. I think that we go a bit crazy when, after adapting to this situation, we don't have to anymore. Maybe, the signals that have been hidden become super strong after that. But let's see. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauliina. Yeah, that's a interesting questions raising. I would also like to point out those who are in Zoom. You can put questions during the talks already in the questions and answers Q&A you should have. So please open that and start sending questions that we can have a discussion afterwards. And the ones who are in this panel and visible in the Zoom, you don't need to write the questions, but you can then just raise the hand. But if you have something, just write it, that we remember. Okay, I hand it over to Adam. Stage is yours.
All right, I'm here. So first of all, I also want to say thank you for inviting me to Aalto, to the first laser. Leonardo's mixing it up with, I know, the BioArt Society. So I'm like, glad to be here. I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see if this works, I believe so. And yeah, my talk, I have way too much, so Laura, feel free to cut me off at any time. I'll try not to go too over. This is about uncanny contagion, uncanny cures, uncanny containment, and uncanny contact. And I'm going to start with just the idea of isolation, social distancing, and what it means that we're in sort of a bad sci-fi movie right now. It's sort of a B movie. It's dystopian, but it's not very well scripted. We're dealing with avoiding crowds and staying as solitary as possible within our pods, we're calling them now, like dolphins. And we're feeling kind of caught, I think, in the idea that we can't really avoid crowds, right? We can't really social distance correctly. Now, I want to preface what I'm saying with this. I usually go as far as possible into making transgenic humans using do-it-yourself technology. This is biolistic testicle blowgun alterity, where nanoparticles of gold mixed with DNA are on a piece of metal that is being shot. They're being sort of shot into my testicles. So I kind of enjoy the idea of biology being experimented with, but right now we're dealing with something like gene therapy going airborne. We're dealing with a sort of mortal thinning of ourselves and becoming virus, becoming viral, and it's a little bit scary. I think people are looking at this pandemic and they're kind of wondering. They're wondering, what can I do besides wash my hands and wear a mask? What can I do besides take the vaccine? And a lot of people don't have total trust in the vaccine. And I'm not just talking about anti-vaxxers. I'm talking also about people that just have some trouble with the idea of the vaccine being a competitive corporate thing, and that there are 5 available, but you can't get all 5. You know, your nation has to buy one of them for you, and there's sort of a bidding war. It's awkward. There are a lot of other things than money that are awkward. Money doesn't always equal care, but it's awkward just to think about what we can do as far as containment, right? Like, this is an artist in Poland who mowed the grass into a checker pattern so that people could socially distance nicely. And I think this sort of containment thing is a nice response to what is otherwise. I've noticed a lot of people are sort of getting that fatigue and just saying, well, we might as well get it. Let's go hang out and live our days. Other people that are resistant to that idea of just letting down your guard are spending as much time as they can on the screen, including us in this Zoom interface, and eyes are getting sort of flared up a little bit, maybe crisped a little bit, and also maybe, like Pauliina was saying, some of our senses are getting a little bit dulled, as if we're turning into bad fidelity, MP3 quality sound ears, or JPEG web quality eyes. And also, there is that feeling like your life, your love, your family, your work, even your sex life sometimes is all based on the screen, and you're sort of just sticking your head in there. I tried to come up with different ideas of what we could do to escape this and still be safe. And one was an interorificial economy suit, where people's eyes and nostrils and ears and mouths and other major portals of their body were connected somehow by wires, and then eventually wirelessly connected, including like an interorificial economy, right? Where like your nipples could talk to someone else's nose, or someone else's ears could actually listen to someone else's eyes. It's a kind of proprioception. Now, at the same time, as I'm trying to make these sort of interorificial suits, I think if we go totally full on space station, we're a little too late already, like as far as ecology or even trying to have lives. And non-humans are looking at us, and I think there is some non-human interspecies kin kind of philosophy to what goes on at the BioArt Society in these lasers, et cetera. It's not just about art and science, it's also about art and ethology, art and interaction with the non-humans. And one thing that I want to emphasize in all this is that the virus is a being. We're beings, and one of the reasons that we feel uncanny and uncomfortable, besides the fear of mortal ruin or long haul COVID, which really kind of sucks from what I've heard, is that we don't even understand what it means to be alive, and in particular, what it means to be inhabited by a virus. This is human development, this slide. This is, these are embryological stages that you may not recognize in yourself, but you were once these aliens. What I guess I'm trying to say is that the virus, to begin with, isn't after you. It doesn't hate you. It's not vindictive. The virus just likes lungs. It likes your tissues. It likes to use you. Oh, this is sort of awkward, but it likes to use you as an external reproductive system. Right? So like it's sort of, it's just piggybacking. It might be a parasite, but it's not mean. We don't know enough about the virus. It is a being. So maybe in the name of kinship and interspeciesness, we should try to get to know the virus, right? Even though it's using us as reproductive systems. So I hope that we can get to know and rethink the boundaries of human contact and interspecies contact. But I also hope we can find other ways than social distancing, to find new ways of becoming sustainable in a world of contagion. I also think that we have to remember that there are people on the right and on the left that sort of don't want to wear masks. I'm running into this here because I'm used to these sort of people in the South of America that are real Trumpies, even to this day, that say things like Nietzschean things, a little bit dumbed down Nietzschean, like sacrifice the weak, that don't want to wear masks. And then there are people on the left that don't want to wear masks because they believe in love and conspirituality as something that will keep them alive, or that they're healthier because they're alternative. I'm going to return to this idea that I do hands-on biotechnology. And so I'm going to try to get a scientific thing across, which is the mRNA vaccines are housed inside of nanoparticles of fat. It's called lipofection. And lipofection, these nanoparticles of lipids, which is basically cocoa butter, sort of saponified, like made into soap. And inside of that, those nanoparticles are the mRNA virus. But you could just scrape your skin and take some of this lipofection agent and some of the mRNA and rub it on your skin, and it would be inside your body. The lipofection agent does get in. And we did this actually in the Netherlands and in New York. And on my way to Twente, I stopped at AKI and did a lipofection massage class, like a do-it-yourself. And there is a chance that we could come out with, instead of an injection, a group massage oil, so people could actually massage each other, and the viral, the vaccine would get into your body. That's awkward. It might take a little bit of extra, but it also might be more friendly to people, like feel a little bit more authentic. I don't know how to say it. I am interested in alternative ways of thinking about the virus, about containment, about what a cure is, even it's a little bit, maybe there are other cures than vaccines, and also making contact with each other and with the virus. But the last thing I want to leave with, and this is for the discussion later, Pauliina, I've been studying a mechanosensory specialization in cave fish. And it seems like in caves, as they go blind, they do develop other senses too. These are little mechanosensory receptors that grow almost like tears under where the eyes used to be. So I'll leave it at that. And if you need my email, I'm available. Was that too bad, Laura? Did I cover it?
Yeah, that's really good. Thanks, Adam.
Time's okay? All right.
Yeah, and then I just hand it over straight to Cristina, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm really excited. Now I will try to share my screen seamlessly. And also, please let me know if I will go a bit over, but I shouldn't. Can you see my screen? All good? Perfect. Awesome. So let's start. Today, I will talk to you about how our body, our communication, our relationship with technology is changing, and how now more than ever, we should strive to responsibly design technology for a future worth wanting. We are all experiencing a moment of rapid change. 2020 catapulted us in a new world. We are experiencing a different way to interact with each other. And in particular, we're using a lot more digital and automated technology than before. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated our everyday adoption of technology and also made us aware of the fact that our life is mediated by technology. We have a collective awakening, quite abrupt, and we are fast adapting to this new reality. And arguably, we are actually accepting this new reality even faster than it was before. We experience a new reality for our body, our senses, and we have a renewed awareness of our self-image and collective image. And indeed, technology mediates our human experience, the way we see, the way we experience and understand the world, and the way we understand ourselves. But actually, it always had, even technology that is not digital or automated. The thermometer, even the very simple one with just the mercurium inside, mediates our experience and knowledge about the body temperature. It's not our body that senses another body temperature, but we understand it through the mediation and representation of this tool, this device. But what is happening right now? Well, we are communicating online through devices like we are doing now. Our body is not really three-dimensional or physical. We are almost an avatar. And sometimes we regain a body if we are put with like an iPad on a stick or, for example, on a telepresence robot. Our senses are limited. Our vision and auditory signals are predominant, but we lose smell, touch, we lose spatial understanding. We might also converse with something that is not human, with an alter, with something else. We might converse with bots. And for example, a lot of people is now trying to be less lonely by actually talking with Alexa or Google Home, that are like smart technology that you can have in the home. We might also give care to something that is altered and embodied. Healthcare professionals are experimenting the use of social assistive robots to support them in the COVID-19 crisis, for example, in the north of Italy. And we substitute the physical closeness with another and the warmth of the support during care to something that parses data and makes decisions on when and how to socially interact. The pandemic also opened us even more to the concept that we are actually treated as data and data points. We are using facial recognition to proctor exams, and our identity is hence reduced to vectors on a screen. Our health and physical activity, that now is important, very important considering the pandemic, is again even more reduced to numbers because we cannot even do activity with others, and we are really concerned about our health. Apps and even robots like drones are enforcing and nudging our behavior to be maybe more healthy and to fix ourselves into a norm that maybe is not the one that we want to have. Definitely, it's great progress and it helped us during this crisis. And we need these adaptations, but we also need to critically assess our human technology relationships. First and foremost, we need to think about how to be in contact with others and how our embodiment changes and our self-understanding. What happens if we do feel like an avatar rather than a person with a body and a sense of being? What happens to our relationships? And we know already much about it because we are in that. Do our norm change? Do we interact differently? How do we adapt our behavior? And we know from research that we tend to treat people, for example, on a telepresence robot, like a hybrid between a machine and a human. We are way less normative in sense of being nice and polite. We mute ourselves also here on Zoom. Would we ever do that in a real conversation? We need to pay attention to this new vision of self, how we embody ourselves through technology and the social group we are in. We need to find the humanity in the representation of self in our interaction and not lose ourselves in the machine. And talking about losing ourselves in the machine, when we talk to machines like conversational interface, we need again to pay attention to the way we establish the relationships with them. What happens if we change the way we converse? This kind of technology are really much utilitarian and functional. Do we want to talk that way? And we need also to think about all the bias that is embedded in these technologies. For example, Alexa has been designed with female personas and often addresses abusive language in a dismissive or even very submissive manner. So if you say to Siri, "Hey Siri, you're a bitch," Siri used to respond in, "I'd blush if I could." So what are the implications of conversing with this machine that respond in that way? In a recent paper, we advocated the use of intersectional feminism theory and critical design could help to include voices that are not represented and going beyond the power structure and bias that we have in these technologies. What happens in our relationship with others that are embodied, like robots? What happens when trust between a robot and a human is broken or strange? What happens if only the warmth that you need to feel better comes from a social machine? What happens if you are deceived to think that is a friend or somebody that is really helping? Definitely, robots leverage the tendency of humans to anthropomorphize and relate. It's a pretense, it's an illusion of life that can be deceptive. But what we need to do is to try to build together a responsible pretense in which we leverage the illusion of life, like when we are in the movies or when we have an imaginative friend, but we still make sure that there are boundaries and full control on the human side. And lastly, what happens when we become data? The quantification and algorithmization of self brings about the issue of power, bias, and who controls data and who does algorithm. What happens if facial recognition technology profiles and discriminates students of color, as we know that is particularly biased to that population? What if technology is paternalistic to us? What if we lose connection with our humanity? In conclusion, technology is mediating our being in an unprecedented way. Being a screen, touching a robot, chatting with a bot, losing the body is still positive because we can come together, even if we can't. But we need to design these technologies responsibly, taking into account the power structure around technology development, reclaiming the humanity over utilitarianism, checking bias, supporting diversity and inclusivity is fundamental. art and design and philosophy, sociology and computer science can come together to help imagining and ideating technology with a moral imagination, thinking about what is right and wrong without saying no, but really assessing how we can do better and informing the development of a future worth wanting. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. All right, guys, now it's supposed to be the fun part to discuss. So what should we discuss? It's first of all, I welcome again the audience. Please put questions. If you have questions directly to the discussion, write them in Q&A. If you have a kind of a more general comments or some other problems, or you're looking for something, then put it in the chat. So a little bit like that, but if you take part, and we warmly welcome this. Yeah, and for the stamp size panelists here, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand either physically or then if I don't notice you in the digital thing. I would also like to say that there is in the chat, Xenia has posted a link if you want to get to the list that you know about the next talks. And Nitin actually has here already a question. So I let Nitin to ask and hold on to mine. Please.
Hi, everybody. It's really wonderful to have you in our first seminar, and it's such a thought-provoking set of talks. I had a question for each of you based on your talks, and they maybe help us open up this discussion and maybe be even more provocative. For Pauliina, I was thinking about blind source separation, and I first heard about this term when I was also doing my own work in audio research, and I note that there's been some research around how echolocation is done in bats, and that they perform this blind source separation all the time, but they have evolved to do it, obviously. So they have adapted their acoustic systems to do this kind of blind source separation. I wondered if you have encountered this in your discussion with colleagues, and what you think about that as an adaptive strategy. For Adam, I wanted to ask you about this notion you were bringing about this mutual relationship we're building with the virus right now. And perhaps the virus is occupying our bodies for a very important reason to somehow, there's some ecological larger game plan around having us readapt to our ecologies to stop destroying diversity in our ecosystems. And the virus is simply helping us recognize that and finding new ways of reducing climate damage. So there may be something else going on purely than a parasitic relationship that is in a larger ecological game plan. So I wanted to address that with you. And lastly, with Cristina, I loved your phrase about responsible pretense and how rethinking robotics with that could be a different framework, because we often worry that robotics can be too anthropomorphized. And so what does it mean to be responsible in that way? How much transparency does AI and robotics have to provide so that we have the facade of empathy without the facade of while still recognizing that it is an artificial empathy? So I'll leave those three provocations with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Fantastic questions. Who wants to start? Just put your mics open, and then Pauliina lifts her hand up, so go for it.
I would like to say that this comparison to bats, how they do it naturally, I think that very often we mathematicians try to mimic something that is done in a much more beautiful and sophisticated way in nature. So that is something that happens often. But I have some comments. May I say some comments to Adam and Cristina? To Adam, I loved it when you mentioned that the virus is not mean. The virus does not hate us. Because actually for the virus, of course the virus does not hate us. Actually for the virus, it's not good to kill the host. it's kind of it happens accidentally that the ones that are carrying the virus sometimes die. I mean, for the virus, it would be better if it would not be that harmful for us, but it could live in a host for a long, long time, and it would actually help it to spread even better. And for Cristina, I would like to say that I loved many things in your presentation, but one of the things that kind of caught my attention was that when you mentioned that we are more like becoming avatars, and in that process we cannot smell or we cannot touch, but we are more like images online. But there's also one thing that I love it, which is related to something else that you said, and that's the discrimination part. And if we are avatars, in plural form, I mean, we can have several genders. We can be of several races. We can actually be from different backgrounds. We can have multiple personalities and lose the change that are given us by our gender or color or background or the country where we live at. So I also think that we lose something, but at the same time we might actually gain something. So those were my comments. Thank you.
Awesome. Maybe I will reconnect just because I'm really triggered. Thank you so much, Pauliina and Nitin, for your questions, and Adam for your presentation. That was really thought-provoking. I think that the fil rouge, the leitmotif, if you want, is really this concept of pretense, with also what you say. So in general, the human experience had always been to do with pretense. Somehow, the presentation of self of Goffman and the way we are in society, or the 1,000 faces of Pirandello. So there are always this concept, the way we present ourselves, the story we tell, the narratives that shapes us and our milieu. And definitely to reconnect with Pauliina, we can shape our being the way we want. We can curate also our being the way we want. And this could open to conversations about the way we are our true first self, so to say. But at the same time, we need to make sure that there is an awareness of this for everybody, because the problem is that without awareness and knowledge, it comes then the misbalance of power, and who has the knowledge and who has the data then decides who you are even, right? And who can you be in the future? And to reconnect to what Nitin asked me in respect to what I was saying in my very brief talk, definitely pretense is always there with all our objects. Depending on our culture, we are more or less always in a relationship with our object, and we care for them, even the ones that are inanimate. The ones that are animate, we feel even more because we actually think that they are sentient. What we could do to make it a responsible pretense is to make sure that the robot itself communicates in a certain way that you really understand the level of intelligence that it has, and it doesn't look like it's more intelligent than it actually is. And sometimes it could also just be nonverbal behavior. And when it's verbal behavior, you could also engage in conversations that are, again, of pretense, like about whatever social interaction you want to talk about, but that also explains how the robot reasons and why it reasons that way. But again, there's a problem of power, right? So who decides to do the algorithms and the data? But I do believe that some explainable behavior, both nonverbal and verbal, could help, as well as making sure that they're not maybe too intelligent and too replicating our human likeness. It's not even needed, I believe, sometimes, right? Maybe we just want a little bit of robotic that is just give a tiny bit of illusion of life, but it doesn't go beyond. That's a bit my point of view. But Adam, please go ahead, because I actually would like to know, would you be interested in having a fictional conversation with the virus as if it was an agent? What would he say? What conversation would he have with us?
Well, Cristina, Pauliina, everyone, Nitin too, thanks. I first want to just say that I have trouble just talking about benefits and the long arch towards utopia because I don't have that much faith in our future. And at the same time, that probably comes from a good place, right? I don't want to be too utopian for no reason. I would say that the normal language for a virus, it would be an endoparasite. It comes from a reservoir, and now, we are its host and we are the reservoir. But there's a thin line between parasitism, commensalism, which is just eating at the same table, and endosymbiosis, or symbiosis, working together. Many of our features, our anatomical features, came from abundance, genomic abundance, and also repetition, sometimes caused by viruses. Whole genomes may have been inserted into our genome from viruses and then gone on to become plenty for our adaptation in the future. So although we feel fear of sickness, fear of becoming super spreader, feel unsutured, a little raw, that may lend to human humility. And I think that's one of the things Nitin was hoping to get to, which is that we're not just machines made of meat, we're multi-organisms, we're flowing, and we have to not take ourselves as the center. Anthropocentrism leads to the Anthropocene. On the other hand, besides the fear of becoming a typhoid Marty or a typhoid Mary, I do think some of the humility comes with realizing that these viruses are part of our microbiome, but that we are giving birth to them. And so our bodies, and even male bodies, push aside that patriarchy. You're welcome to birthing an alien. Welcome to birthing a parasite. Some people already know what that's like. As far as talking to the virus, I think that I would first want to get something like this, a machine. This is a Bosch vacuum cleaner with something like this, and just sort of turn it on before I would talk to the virus, and then hold it over my face like this. And then I could talk to the virus and say, hey, I'm really glad to see you, I'm sorry that you just came along, but if my batteries run out, I'm back in this sort of wishing to be a hermit sitting on a column as opposed to being anywhere near anything that lives. I don't think the fear of life is going to help. And I don't think that becoming the screen is going to help completely. I don't think that even the screens are not sterile, right? Like our computers and our phones this is probably, the most likely to need a spray down of all things, right? So, I don't know though. If I had to talk to the virus, I think I would talk to the virus like any other organism, a little bit,
Okay, I wanna
try to listen
in here. There's also Koray, but Koray, go first. I wanna introduce a term today with a colleague in the office. We're chatting a little bit about the adaptation, and she said, yeah, it's interesting also this term of acceptation. And that is a term where the idea is that it is a shift in the evolutionary function or behavior of a person. So you have something what used to be. So if Darwin was going with a natural selection with the ideas, okay, you adapt to your environment, etc., acceptation is something we might have, and it takes a new function. But I'm also thinking in most of your talks, like with the senses, with the virus, with the robots, how could this be sort of thought out in a different way? Maybe there is something, I think, who was it who was asking also about, Cristina was probably asking about the virus is not only bad to us, it's an evolutionary thing with humans, that we have pests and we change with them. So this acceptation is an interesting term. I don't know if you have anything to say about it, where the natural selection is no longer the primary one.
Can I ask, are you asking about accepting mortality, which does come at a certain age, or accepting the idea of that when you're on the earth, you do suffer to some extent, some punishments of just being and interacting? Or
No, what I'm more thinking is that evolution of human, not so much about mortality, but more about, I guess, underlying this idea of acceptation is, for me, it's the big question when we suddenly find well, not so suddenly, but we find ourselves in this situation where there's all kinds of crises around the corner. Are we able to change? Are we as a human species, as a Homo sapiens, are we capable of change, which is fast enough that our species survives? Because if you look into the history of the Homo sapiens and you follow it, you see that where the Homo sapiens has went, there's often been extinction of other species. So one could say we're very dangerous, we're very dominant. So I'm looking into maybe more difficult questions. What can happen in the future? And like I share Adam's cynicism partly, I think, in this, that maybe things are already too late. And if that's so, what should we do with the rest of the time?
Well, that's a good question, but I also feel that the human species in itself has always tried to cheat evolution somehow, because we have tried to go beyond the natural system, and we have created our artificial system. And thanks to the Renaissance and eventually the revolution in the industry, so the Industrial Revolution, we think that we are always going towards progress, and that whatever innovation we bring is good, and that what we think and we conceive for our well-being, it's good. And I do believe that it's a bit of a fallacy, because we are in an ecosystem that also has, other entities, and we always overlook them. And we actually sometimes take care more of the artificial entities that we bring up, such as technology, robots, or whatever, than the actual natural entities that we have around. So I do believe that we might change if we have another Copernican revolution like it was the Renaissance. If there's something critical like it's happening now that really will shake our being and change our outlook, because it's always a matter of culture, because we are such social animals that we have a collective intelligence and we work all together with this. All that is happening now, it was imagined already. So our narratives were already there with the idea of positivism, of progress. And now we might have to reconsider that. And I think that that is the critical aspect to bring us towards a future that is not bringing us to the Anthropocene, that I don't think it's that desirable.
Cora, go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for these great talks. I will follow from Laura. Actually, well, we know now the strong signals will grow. We're turning in one way to avatars. We have different relationship with virus. And just before we become data, then how this adaptation will embody us? What is you can think about in transhuman, posthuman, or any, from any perspective. What do you really foresee? How this adaptation will do something beyond currently what we are doing with our senses?
I at least would like to say that what we have been talking about is like how we adapt. Like we have been talking about technology and living in internet and how we are commuting using technology, etc. And what will happen, how we will adapt. I think it currently I think that we have divided this world into very unequal places. I mean, we are talking about adaptations that require technology. I mean, what is happening in resource limited settings? The adaptation there is completely different. So, I mean, what to say about how do we adapt? What happens to us human beings? I think we are now looking at we are all kind of having a very narrow viewpoint to that. We assume this, that we are surrounded by technology, we have access to that, we are educated enough to use that and all. And I think that even like currently adaptation to this difficult situation in resource limited settings is completely different, and that's why I think it's kind of very difficult to think like what will happen to us as a human race, because currently it seems that we are very, very divided.
Mm.
If I can add to that, I sort of relate to this through first bioinformatics. That
Adam, it's a little bit difficult to hear you.
oh, I think is that better? Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit better.
Okay,
Yeah.
I put my papers on the microphone. One of the things I would say is that I think of how people feel about bioinformatics, about their data, their body, their identity in some ways being digitized, and their heredity being available online for corporatization, for patents, et cetera. And this coincides with a sort of experimental vaccine, which is one of the 3 or 4 things that's suggested for all the public in the entire world, which is wear a mask, stay at home if you can, and get the vaccine, and stay away from other people. That's not enough, because I think of what Pauliina is talking about, and also Corey's question, which is that not everyone has zero memory about science's collusion with the military industrial information machine. It's not unbiased. It hasn't become a clean thing, science. It's still colluding with the war machine. I mean, in other words, science makes weapons better every day, as well as making what may be miraculously a really good vaccine really quickly. But I've heard some people complaining, like, why wasn't there an Ebola vaccine really quickly? Why is it this one that seems to be affecting the affluent as well? And so I have my criticisms, because even some people wonder whether this was a germ warfare research project gone wrong. And I'm not just into conspiracy theory for fun. It is fun. I watch the X-Files, but I know that gain of function research was being done with, viruses at Wuhan, but also that the funding came from UC Davis, and that it may have been that the dangerous gain of function research was outsourced in a neo-colonialist way to China, so that because it wasn't allowed to be done in the UK or the US, et cetera. So when the public has a sort of mistrust that comes from, in my opinion, intelligent science studies. When I've farmed organically, I understand permaculture. I also am not a technophobe, but there needs to be some balance, and I think that's what we're talking about. As far as adaptation, this sort of economy of thought needs to be in the conversation. So I'm glad it's here, because it's certainly not in a lot of places.
We have a question from audience. Should we take it in between here? So Patricia, Konstantin, thanks everyone for your talk, super interesting. Then I always thought about adaptation as essential, as something that allows living organisms to survive something, hence something very actual if we think about COVID-19 or climate change. Christina's talk made me think about it in a different way. Adaptation, then in the bracket, to a very biased environment, environmentally destructive, thinking about the ecological impact of the digital and mediated technological existence. So as adaptation as something that we need to resist and find in a way. I wonder if any of you know or can think of any examples of resistance to adapting, or if any of you can think of strategies of resistance in the same way as masks are used to defy facial recognition in protests around the world, for instance. Thanks a lot. So that's that question. Anybody wants to pick up, just open mic. And
the simplest way to resist is very similar to the mask. You can put a piece of tape on your camera and you don't get your data stream from vision. And that's something that a lot of people is doing. Or you also decide, for example, to make data open to everybody. So open science also is a byproduct of that, as well as, unfortunately, at least from my point of view, is the resistance to vaccines, right? I'm not agreeing with that, but that's a very large part of the population that does that, right? To resist to this technology, because a vaccine is indeed a technology anyhow, and they don't agree with deploying it into your body, right? And a lot of people don't believe that, for example, 5G should be deployed in our cities, right? And what should we do there? Because of course, as a scientist, you might discard that as some sort of irrational thoughts, but at the same time, it's a way that people use to also make sense of what they don't understand or they don't want. They don't find something that they should have in their lives. And I wonder what Pauliina and Adam think about this.
Can I start, Pauliina? One of the things that I would remind people is that organisms don't adapt towards fitness. They adapt towards flexible survivability, possibly, but they also adapt rather blindly. And although I guess there's Waddington talked about that we are in canals, there's a canalization, each species, and we can rise over sort of out of the canal and over to the other side of the mountain and we'll be in another canal, but that we're not really progressing towards a final aha moment. We're actually not really going anywhere in particular. And so there is no fitness that we can achieve. There is no adaptation that is better. There's, in fact, as the environment changes, it's hopeful that our adaptations haven't become so specialized and so rigid that we can't, I guess, flex into a new environment. That is adaptation. So adaptation is really open and it doesn't have a direction.
I kind of agree with Adam with that. But at the same time, I wish to claim that we, human race, we are getting better. I think that, I mean, if we look back, we are getting better. We are getting, more tolerant, more acceptable, more loving, more understanding. I mean, as a whole, of course, there are some subgroups, and we are also like getting. We are learning more. I think we are getting wiser. But at the same time, I also agree with the resistance. I mean, I have a tape in my computer camera. I just took it out for this presentation, but I have a tape there. I don't want this. I don't want to be videotaped all the time. So I think that definitely there is resistance, but I still think. But I mean, maybe I am like that. I think that this world is a beautiful place, and I think that I'm a human lover. I know some people say that they love animals. I love humans. I love the beauty of humans, the beauty of the beauty in variety of humans. I mean, I would hate that everyone would be like me. I mean, I couldn't actually tolerate one single person being like me, but I love humans. I think that we are good and we are getting better still. And I don't want to resist that.
Thanks for the super positive. I think there's a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily agree with you, but I have to say, I think it's a very refreshing.
Love and peace to all those that don't agree.
Yeah. We have another question. Should we take that from audience? Taru Koski. Adaptation of a species has to do more with sustaining a certain systemic way of life from generation to generation. That involves a certain sustaining of a specific cultural way of relating, for example, to dynamic cultural emotioning. Then is in brackets Humberto Maturana, which is a reference here. So after these masked times, what is it that we want to sustain as in a cultural way of relating to one another and to the environment? How can we lead the emotional culture of our times towards a better direction? Emotion not as a passion of an individual, but as a way of relating within community.
I'm going to start and try to tie this to the last question, which is semi-impossible, but I guess I spend a lot of time thinking about the aesthetics of future human genetic engineering. And this is sort of the human becoming post-human, transhuman, or cyborgized. But it's also being born with someone else's desire for betterment built into your metabolism, built into even your, potentially your emotional range. Right? So they talk about enhancement being longer living, healthier, cancer resistant. And this is called human enhancement, but there's a few things down the line, like not being able to experience depression, being emotionally balanced. It would be a human enhancement that someone would consider to be health or health plus. I am an artist, so my aesthetic is towards the widest range of creative interpretations of what it could mean to be a different anatomy. As we start to redesign ourselves and our genomes, we're going to have different anatomies, and these anatomies and these ways of being, including how you see the world, are determined somewhat by how long your arms are, or whether you were born cubist, or whether your parents wanted you to be a sports figure or a scientist and they bought you bigger brains or longer legs, and what kind of pressure that puts on you, right? But also what kind of inevitable diversification, but also inevitable sort of neo-eugenic problems that occur when you're doing this. And this, to me, leads into, I guess this is sort of confusing, but I'm not sure which way we should plan on progressing. So I tend to look at different art places than just the human being the measure of all things, kind of a Renaissance feeling, and get into some of the more contemporary, or at least modern, like what is the surrealist implications? What are the cubist implications? What is abstraction in the human genome as we start to engineer ourselves? And that might be easier for space travel, but it's not as pretty. So I guess when this ties to Pauliina's question, which is like, I love humans too, and I love life. I think I can be that positive. But when it comes to making ourselves better, is there only one way towards betterment? Because if there is, I'm really, really dubious. I need to unpack that.
There's a question. Kirsi wants to step into the discussion, please.
Thank you, Laura. So thank you also for all speakers for very inspiring talks and discussion so far. It's very interesting to me to think about this, that how do we develop here after this kind of, crisis in general, but especially when we have a crisis that treats us more or less equally. So this equality perspective is something I would like to ask you all. That, for example, maybe Pauliina was already touching a little bit this. I remember almost a year ago when this pandemic was only starting, and we had some discussion with people in Mexico, for example. That time they had the situation where the numbers were pretty much the ratios the same as in Finland, but now it's much worse there. And the people were mostly already that time concerned about this, that it's the rich people who bring the virus, and it's the poor people that will then have to suffer the most. So how do you think about this? Do we become more equal after this kind of crisis, or what do you think?
I would like to address this. At first, Kirsi said that, it's the rich people that bring the virus and it's the poor people that suffer the most. And unfortunately, I mean, I think that that's quite true. I mean, it's the rich people that fly. It's the rich people that travel in very resource limited settings. You don't travel to the next city. You are not bringing the virus to the others. And in resource limited settings, there are no big houses, there are no nice computers and internet connections. People cannot isolate as in places where people are rich. So what about after that? Kind of this virus treats us equally in a sense that, all rich and poor can get it, but the probabilities for getting infected differ. Like there are huge differences. And also if you think about recovering and death rates, they definitely depend on access to high level healthcare, etc. But what about after this? I mean, let's think about, for example, the vaccines. These are not currently, it seems that these are not divided equally between different countries. I don't think that after this we are more equal. To me, it seems that we are less equal, because already it seems that, the rich countries, they would like to go first, of course. I mean, I'm not blaming anyone here. It just seems that for us, it's more like, for us humans, it seems to be, me first.
I want to comment on that. For me, this vaccine situation is just astonishing. I do not understand why it's a global pandemic and affects everyone. Why is it not open source? Why is it not that every nation could produce their own vaccine? I think this kind of situation somehow bring out real greediness and also, traits of maybe our species nature or characteristics. And yeah, just a short comment. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's not my expertise, so I would just drop it as an informed person. But I mean, the elephant in the room is capitalism and colonialism, right? And the point is that we are in a system that necessarily to have some people that are well off and some people that they aren't. Therefore, we need to reconsider that, because I think that if anything, this situation has exposed how much we are still actually far behind on those matters within our society, because there's still a very much paternalistic and colonial tendency in our own Western society. And broadly, we are also in a very unbalanced relationship with the global south, and we are not really doing anything to address that, as well as we are actually bringing the issues forward, not addressing as more powerful countries the issue of climate change. Right. So I don't want to sound bitter, but I think we need to be a bit realistic and address the power structures that is around us. Because us as academics, we are usually not particularly in politics or political, even though everything is political, arguably. But eventually that's something that we need to address, because what I don't like, at least from my perspective as a technologist, is that technology is not a patch that saves everything. Sometimes you don't even need it, right? And maybe we should learn from a population that don't have much technology, how to go back to what means the most for us.
Yeah, I can add to that a little. I mean, I think global capital is loving this. I mean, they have everyone worldwide in a sort of hygiene panic, and it's separating everyone even further into monads. Instead of having community, you're not even allowed to have interpersonal communication. But also, it's sort of like each individual is responsible for their own arms race. It's a hygiene arms race. It's like, I can afford this and you can't afford that. The sort of like, what can I do to separate myself from my fellow humans? And this is our community right now. And for some reason, Amazon delivering by drone seems like a really good, profitable capitalist system for everyone, even more than ever. And that is isolation. And I think ways to find other things to do about the virus than preserve your own personal integrity. Like, well, I don't understand why there aren't more programs for helping people get together in safe ways instead of telling everyone to stay at home. Because for one thing, most people don't have enough money to just stay at home. They don't telecommute. That's not an option. And the people that are telecommuting are asking people to deliver them groceries and putting other people at risk. So there's not really a quarantine. There's a quarantine for those who can afford it. But I do think that there are other options. I've worked a lot with biological levels of containment in art, BL1 through 4, and it'd be really interesting to have a BL2 or a BL3 disco where people could come and dance through latex and sort of touch each other with gloves, but not breathe on each other or fart on each other, but still be able to have some sort of feeling or touching and in mass. That's not something that the state is too serious for that sometimes. And maybe that's part of the problem.
Okay, Cora, you had your hand up, so please go ahead. And after that, we have a question from audience.
Yeah, it came to my mind. I mean, this staying home, for example, was not something that we imagined way earlier, right? I mean, when we were in secondary school, high school, we were all promised with flying cars like everyone else from utopian perspective, space travel, dystopian perspective. We were actually expecting robots to take over by now. And these things didn't happen. And now
Did Cora freeze?
Like he's saying, it's not a techno-utopia quite yet.
He froze the last
Robot cannot make it so far.
Okay.
We cannot even do these kind of interactions. Think about robots. We will never
Hey,
make
Cora,
it.
you
sorry,
froze.
I'm back. Sorry, I mean, but I'm saying that, I mean, now we are facing with unfulfilled future, right? What has been like promised is not being delivered to us. What do you think about this? How do we cope with this unfulfilled future at the moment?
I don't know, because this is exactly what at least I thought that would maybe happen one day. I think that many people were actually waiting for some virus to spread around the world. At least, you know, when we had this last Ebola outbreak in Congo, I was wondering if this is it. is this now the one that spreads? Then this virus came and I was, oh, this is it, already way before it was actually spreading around the world. So I quite disagree. I quite disagree that this is not what we were promised.
Interesting. I would like to read, there's been waiting in queue now. There's a comment. Thank you for the inspiring talks. I'm a master student of Aalto University. I felt being adapted to online classes and discussion. At the same time, I become sensitive about smell and touch when I communicate in person, because I haven't had stimulus inside online. So I believe that our multisensory is still really important to communicate. Even AI technology is in progress. I'm curious about the panelists' opinion about that. That's an interesting thought. And I think a lot of us are actually, I haven't thought about it, but I think we're on the same track here. That, yeah.
You know what, guys, I think this is super important point. When I'm alone for a long time, I literally touch my own hands. I hold my own hands because I miss human touch. I speak loud. I have a turtle. It's my pet. I discuss with my turtle so that I hear human voice, not only through computer. I need these things. I need to be touched. I'm holding my own hands. I'm singing to me and to my turtle so that, you know, I can use all my senses. So I relate strongly.
I got a weird one here, but I sort of talked about it a little bit. I was thinking of what you were writing about, Pauliina, and also Cristina, your stuff is amazing. So it has to do with this sort of screenification, and it has to do with COVID and the isolation. Everybody has their own economy of how much they're willing to risk in the name of having interpersonal interaction, and their own fear of getting sick and becoming a long hauler, or getting someone else sick and killing their grandma. But I've been studying these cave fish that went blind. They live in caves long enough that their eyes just melted off, and they didn't just disappear. The genes turned into other senses, like mechanosensitive denticles that sort of stream down their face, and they can feel vibration with what appears to be the melting of the eyes genes down the side of the face, and sometimes dripping off the jaw. It's an adaptation to darkness and to the need for feeling, but it's a sadness. The vestigial organ is there and it's blank, and these new sensory organs have formed almost in, I might be anthropomorphizing, but hey, we're all related, to these mechanosensitive skin denticles are kind of like being alone in the dark and sad and wanting to see and not being able to see, and the melting of your organ turning into something new, turning into something that can feel again. And at the same time, I wonder what we have lost over time. For instance, I think our pineal gland got covered by our frontal lobes. And so we're really not in touch in the same way as birds and fish with the moon and the sun and even the stars. We don't have the star maps because it's blocked by this big, ugly, new mutation of frontal lobes that just sort of clogged our pineal gland. But what happens to loss? And I think we're all dealing with some loss right now. And if it's loss of sensation, what replaces it has a kind of sadness to it, kind of triste, you know. So
Okay.
that's maybe adaptation is also loss.
But wasn't this a little bit what Pauliina was also saying, that when we lose one sense, then the others might grow stronger? And I think that's interesting. So I would like to kind of point back to so as an evolutionary beings, maybe we evolve too slow, but let's imagine what could come in the future. And this is of course one part that lose one sense and then you gain another. What's interesting also for me is this idea that what Pauliina is doing is looking at the crowd. So you don't, even if you talk now about the sort of individual and we can relate to it easy, okay, now I don't have the mouth is not shown, my smell is blocked and so on. But you actually look at the crowd as a body, and there's something interesting, I think, in that to think about not individuals, but to think as a body, as a crowd. Maybe just our species. I mean, we do have a much bigger body, of course, on the planet. And at the same time, I'm thinking, Cristina, you said something in your talk also about losing ourselves into the machines and how that's also interesting thought that maybe as you said also that we cheat with the evolution. We definitely cheat with the evolution, I think, as humans. So what's gonna come? I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting thing. And also this, I go back to the Pauliina's, so sorry, I'm not making very much sense because I'm trying to think the same thing I'm trying to articulate. But the Pauliina's, the crowd, but it's also, like you say, you're a mathematician, it's also measurements. It's about measurements, and measurements ring a little bit dangerous bell to a lot of humans always. So I'm like kind of here, I'm not sure what I'm asking. Maybe you have a continuation on this.
I don't know, but what it made me think is that our culture, which is particularly Western culture, was really much influenced by the Greeks. And for the Greeks, the main sense was vision. If you would do something bad to a Greek person, would be killing them and taking away their eye, right? And throughout our history, vision and representation on a visual, medium was the most important thing, right? So think about iconoclasty and etc. So I think in general, we always have lost a bit the concept that we are multisensory and that there is even more that we actually think, and it's not always about what you see and what you can rationalize. Smell, for example, is extremely important because smell is about two things evolutionary. One is memory, because through smell you have much of your memory, and two is about survival, because you can smell things that you shouldn't eat or people that or things that you should not go towards. And when we design our technology of whatever kind, both analogic and more digital or automated, we always predominantly focus on vision, so aesthetics or the sense of vision for example, robots or any other technology, and auditory channels. Touch and smell, they're not really covered yet, and therefore we are losing something that we will not be able to take away from our set of sensorial skills. And we also need to remember that if we also define our supposedly in artificial intelligence only on the ability to rationalize, visualize, and sort, because that's how artificial intelligence is done so far, we are losing the complexity and the human complexity of knowing. A baby is way more intelligent than any machine ever made, because they know from experience, they put the things in their mouth, they go around, they smell. And this is something that we should not forget and that we should not lose. Surely we will have to co-adapt and merge with something else, but still, I believe that we should always retain our humanity. And I would not even say humanity, but also really our being entities of the earth. Because there are animals that, again, they're even more intelligent than artificial intelligent things.
You said
so that's my point of view.
Entities of the earth was really point, because I was just thinking that when you were talking about these senses, that it's interesting to think if we end up in space at some point. Maybe the senses what we need are quite different there than what we have here.
I can always come in there. I often think about space travel and what we're going to turn into, even what non-Terran human design is. Like, would we still have bodies? Would we become granular, like mix our germ cells with sand and send us out into space? We won't even, or can we become spaceships? But I also think that we haven't quite come to terms with the fact that we're organisms. There's a lot of OCD. That's why I would say OCD on a sociological level, not a psychological level, but this obsessive compulsiveness towards cleanliness. A clean machine, maybe it's just some sort of Protestant mishap, but it's like the white walls of the gallery, all like a church without any decoration. I don't understand it, but I know that when people go into space, they need to find a way to get rid of or recycle their excrements that come out of all their ears and noses, and all their fecal matter needs to be either reused or saved till they return to Earth or sent out the side. And so I'm kind of interested in, when it comes to human design, what we have to overcome culturally in order to even begin our design process, right? Like what kind of biases we need to interrogate. So I wanted to throw that down. Anyway, let's keep going. This is fun. We should open it up. This is good.
Somehow your microphone is making a lot of noise. I don't know if it's purposely or has it taken a life of its own. But anyway, there comes a lot of noise sometimes. Yeah.
Guys, it's the technology taking over here.
Yeah. The audience is invited. Q&A in the toolbar. Click that and put a question if you have a question. I think someone is watching a little bit if there's something in the chat, but mainly in Q&A.
Maybe can we try Cristina and Pauliina and anybody else here just to try to work openly together? I want to see how all these relate. And I was thinking about it a lot sort of last night. And I was thinking about, Cristina, you're dealing with artificial intelligence, the cyborg body, the screenification of life, and the retention of some semblance of humanity when a lot of us are feeling like our entire life is now only some sort of data modularization or data dump, and even our bodies are becoming digitized. And Pauliina, you're interested in what happens as this sort of feeling occurs, like what happens to the human organism, how it adapts, but also what kinds of media change, what kinds of sensorial, habitus, like our habitat changes, even our way of determining where we are or who we are. And so, and I'm sort of interested in this, how do we decide which way to engineer ourselves? But I'm also interested in this sort of like biopanic that we're all in, and whether or not the answer is to try to sterilize your locality or your surroundings and only live through the screen, or if it's more about finding playful ways to accept our mortal ruin, and also maybe celebrate less humans on the earth in a deep ecological way. But I don't know, I think there's a lot of crossover. So I want to hear from Cristina, Pauliina, and also our people online, et cetera. But how does this all tie together?
I personally, I love data. I love data. Even though I'm a mathematician, I usually build tools that statisticians apply. But I love data. And part of the tools that I have developed are very much actually related to artificial intelligence. And I mean, it's also a matter of taste what we call artificial intelligence. I mean, are basic calculators artificial intelligence, or it's really a matter of taste. And if we think about what you said about do we have to like accept and not to try to isolate or something like that. I am personally not accepting that I could go soon. I have a goal. It's 111 years. It means plenty of years ahead. I plan to achieve this goal. So, I don't know, because I think most of people are like me. They still have a goal. And it's not fair that I ask the other people to accept if I'm not accepting. So I'm definitely not accepting. I'm definitely not accepting. but I kind of, I think we are all connected. Actually, everything that we do are connected. I'm clearly what I'm doing is connected what Cristina does, but what I'm doing is also connected with basically the art you do, because your art is related to or your research and work is related to you have often this something is contained inside something. I mean that's also related to separation of data into boxes. It's related also to, I think about viruses. They often go inside white blood cells. They are spreading inside containers, then they are breaking up the container, and that's mathematical. So that's kind of related to mathematics also. So I think that everything, all these that might seem a bit, different sides of something, I think it all can come together and kind of be different phases of the same phenomena. But I'm definitely not going to accept I am going to live to 111. After that, I can die unless I change my mind.
Well, it's let's see in a bit how it's going to be in some 70 or 80 years or even more. But actually, I feel like I'm a bit. I would accept my mortality if we have to talk about that. I'm fine. That's the way it is. And the point that I do not accept is that as humans, we do not accept our humanity. I mean, since again the Greeks, we always wanted to have robots or gods that are, always perfect, always doing the right thing, being efficient, being productive, and never have emotions, and being tall and strong. And actually, I would like to see more imperfections. I would like to see that we embrace people that also might look for us being disabled, but they're more than able, and they have other experiences that for us could be extremely enriching. So I think that we are losing a bit sight of the fact that we are finite, that we are here to just be in some sort of a balance with nature, and that we are not the ones in charge. Therefore, I'm totally against eugenetics, and I don't believe that we should go that direction. We should go in the direction to support our health in the way that is possible. But I don't want a perfect human. I want the most imperfect human there is, and try to figure it out where we can go together. Right. And that's why I also don't like robots that are perfect and that they're functional, that they're solving our lives because they know all the data that there is, because A, they don't know all the data that there is because they have very limited senses. B, it's not they don't encapsulate what does it mean to be alive. They're very useful for some things that is robotic. So like the industrialization and the very set acts. They're very nice to be more interactive things. But let's limit at that. And maybe artificial intelligence should not also be explored completely. Maybe we should just limit what we are interested in, right? So, and I know that it sounds a bit strange because I should be the one that says, yes, technology, because that's my job. But the more I am in technology, the more I feel like I want to see imperfections, and I want to just, embrace nature and the way we are, and just do something for our flourishing and our natural flourishing.
But I think that the beauty of human race is in imperfection. I mean, imperfection is perfection. That is what makes us so beautiful. And I mean, I love tech. I love mathematics, and I love imperfection. I think they don't fight with each other. I mean, if we want to develop and be better, it does not mean that we have to be better in a sense that we are always stronger, always smarter. But I think that being better or growing as human race is more like being able to understand the beauty of variety in the world. And it's about growing. It's about growing to be better inside. It's like the soul of human race, I think. And I honestly think that over the times it's getting better. I honestly think that it's getting better.
But that's awesome. I actually love the way you think, and I think it's true. What I think is that we are also projecting what we think we should be onto what we make, right? So the point is that we are actually prisoners of our own narratives, right? So this idea of being like always perfect comes from that.
I think this all comes also based on what kind of values we share, and we don't always share same values. But just as a comment to Pauliina, I'm for also imperfection and diversity. However, I often think that maybe the premises of somehow science and technology is sometimes wrong, because there's often an aim towards perfection. There's an aim for a truth. And if you look at mathematics, isn't mathematics quite totalitarian language in some sense? So it doesn't work when there's a mistake. But now you can correct me.
But mathematics, it's a way to kind of it's a way to be able to cope with this very complicated and difficult world. I think that it kind of brings structure here. Yes, in mathematics, if we have some assumption, then there's a mathematical theorem and it's proven, it's pure truth. That's there is nothing to argue about. But I think it goes hand in hand with this beautiful, complicated world, and kind of just helps us to live here and deal with it, deal with all the difficulties and uncertainties. I think that mathematics is just a way to help us to deal with uncertainties, even if they are beautiful. I mean, I personally, I think that there are so many ifs and so many maybes in the world that at least I need mathematics. I need mathematics to be able to cope with all uncertainties. But it does not mean that, that I would want something to be perfect, because I think that if something would be perfect, that would be just way too scary.
Okay, we have Kirsi has a hand up, and after that we need to a little bit wrap up. So if all of you have a sentence you want to say, then that's after Kirsi.
Okay, thank you. I just briefly want to, because you were talking about the nature of mathematics, so I would like to briefly say that I see mathematics more as a sculpture. So it's developing sculpture. So many people see that it's somehow done or finished and polished, but this is developing all the time, and we find new things, and hopefully for the better. But anything, it's developing. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Nice. So I think it's time. It's like 11 minutes left. So I think we need to wrap up. Adam, do you have a sentence you want to say as your last words in this panel?
Well, I'll try to give signal over noise, but I'm really a big fan of noise. I wanted to remind all of us that only 100 or 200,000 years ago, there was only 10,000 humans on Earth. And they, like we migrated, our populations migrated and intermingled from that point until now. And a lot of people are trying to find new identity with online, like going to 23andMe or ancestors.com and getting their genome sequenced and having someone sort of decipher it for them so that they can figure out their origin story anew. And
3% Eskimo. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. But can I relate it to the fact that we're all related to all organisms on life, and the virus came, whether it came from a pangolin or a bat or a mink, it came across a species barrier. So it's sort of like a kind of interspecies orgy, but it's also kind of because we're all related. So I guess I want to end with the idea that all life is related to all other life.
Pauliina.
Okay, my last lines would be that imperfection is perfection. Peace, hugs, and rock and roll to everybody.
Cristina.
Well, actually, I would take the time to address something that just popped up in the Q&A, because I think it could be a good closure from Jorge Franco about what should we do with K-12 education? How can we actually support the people of the future towards a better future, right? So how can we support new generations? And I really have a soft spot for this, and I really believe that we need to provide our kids really the multitude of knowledge. So typically now it's very much, again, also mechanicized somehow and very much rationalized. The best way to do that would be to give children the independence and discovery of what is going on and what is going to happen, and also propose something to make them, really involve them as scientists, artists, because there's much knowledge in them that we usually not that we leave untapped. And I know that it's difficult for educators, but I think that if you could simply expose them to the variety and multifaceted nature of our situation without telling them, okay, learn mathematics, learn this, learn that, but really more bringing them into challenges and give them a broad spectrum of understanding of what's going on and some knowledge here and there, but just leave them to think about how to tackle challenges. That could be a great way to support K-12 education towards futuring, towards imagining the future, and not only learning what we tell them that is important to know. So that's maybe something that I want to close with, because it's good and it's not about me or what I think, but how we can support other people, which is eventually what I do all the time.
Anybody else from the panelists? Do you want to say something? No words. Koray, yeah.
I can quickly talk about this imperfection. I mean, we shouldn't be scared of that. I guess the technology developers already noticed that. I mean, you can see that the discussions about this randomness that they try to put in deep learning models, and also like when you see how they develop robots and how they actually try to present that, so that they play football, for example. They try to be actually involved in human activities. They come together. They try to actually show how they can be also imperfect in a way. they try to make music as like we do humans, in maybe symbolic levels or not, but so there is a way that we can expect that they want to actually do tasks that then go beyond humans do, and that's good in such various different ways. But I guess they are also trying to be imperfect in one way as well.
Thanks. Okay, so I just want to close with the one comment in the Q&A, which was we need more STEAM. And STEAM stands, of course, not only science, technology, engineering, but also and mathematics, but also the art, which makes it STEAM instead of STEM. So that was one comment. And then we had an interesting comment, which I just want to point at, and we don't answer it, but hi, I'm currently reading the Probiotic Planet, and I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on post-Pasteurian approach in these times of hyper-amplified hygiene. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer that, but we see Adam already going on a different planet. So I think that's it for tonight. Thanks all of you for participating and hanging on there with us. And the next one will be 29th of April. And I hope to see you there again with new speakers, but still on adaptation from a different perspective. Thanks.